to the That Was 3 podcast, where one wrestling-obsessed couple talks all things pro wrestling. I'm Gina.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is the That Was 3 podcast.
Today is our second episode. If you're interested in our background of professional wrestling, how we got back into it 2 years ago, and our experience so far with WWE, I highly recommend checking out episode 1, which was uploaded yesterday. Today, we're going to be talking about how we got into AEW, which is a much more recent thing, and we're going to talk about how we got into it, what we think so far, what we like and dislike about the current state of AEW, and we're also going to get into a little bit the comparisons between WWE and AEW.
We should probably start by saying that this is in no way a podcast that is bashing either company.
That's true.
We are huge fans of now both companies, and there is a lot of things that we don't agree with when it comes to certain shows, and we're just giving our opinion. Literally, we're just two random people in Texas talking about wrestling.
And yeah, that's not to say we're not going to criticize either show, because Gina mentioned last episode that she sips on a lot of hatery, which is so totally true, and I am very critical. So it's not that we're not going to be negative sometimes, it's just we like both shows, and we're going to continue enjoying both shows, even when we do have criticisms about one or the other.
Agreed. Okay, actually, let's get started with how we got into AEW.
Yeah. So I mentioned last episode that getting back into wrestling at all with WWE was very much spearheaded by me. So I was kind of the driving force when we first got started. AEW is something that I think we were both reluctant to ever try, but much more so you. Like, it took you a lot of convincing. Yes. So for me, we only started watching wrestling 2 years ago in 2019, and obviously AEW is a relatively new program. It's only been around for 2 or 3 years at all. So I didn't even really know it existed when we got back into wrestling. I've heard rumblings since we started watching, and a lot of my friends that have, been fans for a long time kept telling me, like, you gotta watch AEW. It's so much better. It's so much better. And for me, there's been a couple of times where I've tuned in, like I've watched a few random Dynamites. I remember when Sting came back, like that was one time that I tuned in. And then I watched the pay-per-view where it was Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley in the exploding barbed wire deathmatch fight, which was amazing up until the really bad ending that kind of like made the whole thing a meme. But only watching it kind of one-off, I never really understood what made it good. I remember watching and thinking, like, this isn't that much better than WWE. I don't know why everybody's, like, going crazy for it. Like, why is everybody I know keep telling me that we should watch it? And so a couple of times over that period, I tried to get you to watch, and you were just not interested.
I was not at all. I watched a couple. He would watch episodes, and I would just kind of be in the same room. And he'd be like, oh, babe, look. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. But for me, when I first started, like, kind of just catching glimpses and stuff like that, I didn't really see a set storyline as compared to WWE.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that I'm so into WWE is because of the storylines. However, not great they can be. I'm very into the theatrics.
The theater of it.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah. I love the performances. I love this stuff. And watching AEW, my first impression was like, no. Like, okay, look at these characters. This is ridiculous. Like, I don't see the point of it. And I was very much sipping on haterade. And also, a lot of my time was already dedicated to WWE.
That is true.
We, at one point, were watching Raw and SmackDown every week, as well as pay-per-views, as well as, like, original content.
Yeah.
Like, it was constant WWE. And I kind of just wanted a little trashy reality TV and to take a little bit of a break from it instead of watching another show, adding another, 2 or 3 hours to it.
So, yeah, and I think we talked about it last episode, that the things that kind of draw us into wrestling. And for me, it was very much the technical aspects, the in-ring work. And AEW, now that we've started watching a little more consistently, I think really hits on that in a way that WWE doesn't as consistently. And I think AEW is really good at long-term storytelling, where their storytelling is a lot more subtle. It's a lot more driven by the people.
And they also let it breathe.
They let it breathe. Yeah, it's not
like
random. Yeah. it's not forced like
that's the
WWE
word.
is. But when you're only watching like one episode, every few weeks, you don't get that. And so I think that's why it was a tough sell for us.
Yeah.
So what really got us into it was, our interest had been piqued before. Sting coming back, Christian coming back, Malachi Black and Andrade debuting with AEW. That was all interesting to us, but not like, oh, we gotta start watching.
Yeah.
What really, I think, turned the corner for me was CM Punk. I follow Sean Ross Sapp and Fightful on Twitter. Highly recommended follows for anybody who likes wrestling. And the rumors started about CM Punk really heavily, like a month or 2 months before it happened. And Sean Ross Sapp, I remember, on one of his podcasts, was asked about Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. Like, what is the percentage you think they'll be in AEW by the end of the year? And he was at like a 9 out of 10 for both guys. Like, he was sure that it was happening. And so I kind of thought, like, CM Punk almost certainly, like, the rumors, there's not this much smoke without some fire, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't watch wrestling when CM Punk was a big deal. With CM Punk, like, there's no nostalgia factor for us. There's no, like, knowledge of him, really. But I was interested because everybody talked about him being great. And I had seen the YouTube video of the Pipe Bomb promo, which was amazing. And that got me interested, so I watched the documentary about CM Punk.
I feel like it's really similar to how when Cena came back, I wasn't around for the scene. Like, I wasn't paying attention for Cena at all. But we were at the Money in the Bank that he returned, and it was a huge, huge thing. Everybody around us was like, oh my God! And I was like, okay. Because I only know Cena from the Bellas.
Yeah, from the Bellas,
so I wasn't the biggest fan at the time. But I feel like it was similar.
Where you feel the energy of the other fans.
Yeah, how like you're excited for it just to see how great this person really is.
Yeah, and not only that, not only like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm interested to see if he's really good in ring. It was, I know based on everyone that is reacting to this, that this is a big deal. Like CM Punk coming back, and specifically coming back to WWE's competitor, it was a big deal. It's a huge deal. So I made up my mind as soon as like the CM Punk rumor started gaining steam. I was like, I'm going to start watching AEW because I'm interested in CM Punk coming back, and I don't want to just start watching for him. I want to like start getting invested. So I started watching Dynamite maybe like 3 or 4 weeks before this CM Punk ended up debuting on Rampage. And after watching 2 or 3 episodes, I think that's where it started to click for me of like, oh, like this is the type of show this is. Like they treat it more like a sport where like matches don't necessarily need a story. They can just be like, we're having a match because we're professional wrestlers and we need to have a match. I really appreciated how like they kept track of people's records and how wins and losses seem to matter, which is really something that doesn't really feel like in WWE.
And then the belts are something to actually like
strive for.
Yeah.
Everything just felt a little more important in AEW, and it was still a tough sell for you. So the way that Gina wasn't really feeling it, like she still wasn't watching Dynamite. She would watch a few things, like I would show her some like spots, and like one of the things that I think started to draw you in was how invested the crowd is, because that's one thing when you watch an AEW show is like
the crowd is a different level.
It's a lot like NXT, the old NXT. But like the way they sing Jericho's song and the way they will do spontaneous chants just based on the promo that's being cut, like that kind of thing, I think she was at least starting to get interested. But CM Punk ended up coming back. That was obviously a huge deal. And then there were a ton of rumors about Daniel.
I think we both watched the CM Punk return.
Yeah, we recorded it and watched it.
That's right.
Because I was at SummerSlam that weekend, so...
I wasn't.
You weren't. But I was at SummerSlam that weekend, and so I didn't get to watch it live. But that kind of piqued our interest. And then the rumors started about Daniel Bryan pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And I know you really like Daniel. I mean, we both like Daniel Bryan, but... I
was like, well, if Bryan Danielson's doing it, we have to stop calling him
That's
Daniel
true.
Bryan.
Yeah.
If Bryan Danielson is like... I think he's a fantastic performer.
Yeah.
And also seeing a different side of him on Divas really like connected me to him in a lot of ways. And like seeing his family, I'm just very invested in that whole family, I think in general. So yeah, when he was possibly going to AEW, I was like, well, I guess we gotta start watching another show.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't watch last episode, we talked about how one of the ways that you got invested in wrestling initially was through Total Divas and then Total Bellas, which I also very much enjoy. Ms. and Mrs. not as much for me. Yeah, you really like it.
I do.
But Total Bellas I really enjoy, and Bryan Danielson is a big part of that because he's married to Brie Bella. And so we love them. Like we would be totally stoked for a Bella's return to WWE, which I know is controversial around super hardcore fans. We don't care. We love the Bellas.
I do. Let's get that WrestleMania.
And we really like Bryan Danielson as well. And we liked him in WWE, but we kind of missed Bryan at his peak in WWE because we started watching in 2019 when Kofi was champion and then he immediately lost to Brock. So we missed Bryan's run as champion, like from this shirt, the People's Champion. And so we only really knew him post that, where he had a few good matches, but really he wasn't that involved in the time that we've been watching.
No,
WWE.
And he was out a lot as well.
He was out a lot, yeah. He's had really good matches here and there, but just not heavily featured. So I knew that if I was going to get Gina into AEW, Bryan's return was going to be it. Like that was the way to hook her. So there was a lot of rumors that it may be happening at the pay-per-view, which was All Out, I believe, AEW All Out. And they were showing it in theaters, which I don't know if that was the first time that AEW did that, but it was the first time I had ever heard of it. And so we booked tickets to a theater. We went with two friends of ours, Matt and Annabelle. Matt is also a very big wrestling fan and was very much into AEW.
They are wrestling friends.
Are only wrestling friends. But Matt loves all wrestling, so he's been a huge fan of the Elite for years. He loves New Japan. He's way more into it and more knowledgeable than we are.
And we plan to have him on the show.
Yeah, eventually we'll have Matt on for sure. But we knew that he would have more knowledge, so we went with them. And we went to see All Out in a theater, which ended up having 10 people in it. It wasn't super packed, but it was a lot more fun than watching it at home.
It was. Yeah. I really liked that experience.
Really fun experience. So, what were your expectations going into that?
I didn't have high expectations at all.
And then what were your opinions? Talk about the show.
So, going in, I was just like, heck yeah. Movie popcorn because it's my favorite treat to do. And so going in, I was just like, yeah, I mean, we get to hang out with Matt and Annabelle, and Annabelle is slowly getting into wrestling, and so her and I get to talk a lot about different things. And I was like, well, Annabelle's there, so if I don't like it, her and I can just talk about this stuff and judge people because I like to sip on my haterade again. And going in, I was just like, yeah, well, and I heard that Bryan Danielson might be back, so I was pre-pumped.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh my God, this is going to be it. This is it. If he comes back, I'm so excited. And then Brie's going to make her return at WrestleMania because it's rumored. I was all for it. And then it started, and I was so surprised with how into it I got. Because the first match, so I'm going to say this, and a lot of people are going to hate me for it, but I am not a Hardy fan. The Hardy Boys fan, I am not it. I think I'm more of a Matt Hardy fan now than I was back then.
Yeah.
I hate Jinko jeans.
Yeah, you also hate Jeff Hardy.
I do, but not him. I hate that and it's not, I don't think it's his fault. I think they're trying to pull that nostalgia of let's have you wear fishnet shirts and Jinko jeans.
We don't have nostalgia for the Hardy Boys because we didn't watch when they were at their peak. We kind of fell off before they rose to being the level they got to.
Let me say though, I 1,000,000% appreciate their athleticism because they are fantastic with their oh my God, I would never, clearly. But I just can't get behind that character, and I think once Jeff Hardy is released, because we know it's going to end up happening.
I hope not.
I do, because I really think he'll come into AEW with his brother and just reinvent a character, because he's got a good character. I just hate that they're oh, you were drunk and we're going to live.
Yeah.
I don't know the Vince McMahon voice because I can't do it, but it's oh, you're going to.
Anyway, the first match was the 6-man tag team or whatever with Matt Hardy's team versus whoever.
The good guys. Orange Cassidy and Jungle Boy. Yeah. And I immediately, I was when they came out, I was Jungle Boy, ooh, original. And then I was yes, Jungle Boy, yes, sir. And Orange Cassidy's character, huge fan, probably one of my favorites. And then Jungle Boy's music was great. And so I remember thinking, like, watching the crowd and even the people in the theater, I was like, man, this crowd is really hyped. Like,
really into
Royal Rumble type hyped, but Royal Rumble was
Like,
a one-off situation, I think, for us, other than Cena's return.
Like, you know how anytime you watch a show, or especially when you're there, at a WWE show, there are matches that just the crowd is dead. And unfortunately, it's usually the women's matches that, like, the crowd dies for. It happens in every single match. It's like the tag team matches and the women's matches, the crowd just is not into it. One thing that has stuck out to me since watching AEW, but specifically at the pay-per-view, is every single person gets a reaction from the crowd like they are the most over person in wrestling.
Yeah,
like
it's all just positive.
It's all positive. Heels, not heels, like everybody just gets a reaction from the crowd in a way. It reminds me a lot of NXT when we first started watching. But it's just so infectious. And so so we watched the show, and I think the entire show was great. Like there was Miro versus Kingston, which was awesome.
Oh, that was good. DMD versus
Britt versus Statlander, which was a really, really good match.
Oh my god, that was the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros.
Yeah, and then we get to the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros.
I think at that point I was like, I'm all in.
That match, that is the best match I've ever seen.
That's the best match I've ever seen.
I had no expectations going in. So like we talked about, we don't really watch AEW until this pay-per-view. Like I had started watching a few weeks before. I was mainly there to see CM Punk and to see if Bryan came. And I don't know, I know of the Elite, like I've watched YouTube videos, like I know people love the Young Bucks and they love Kenny Omega, but we didn't have that attachment to them. So like I didn't have a ton of like expectations for this match. And oh my god, that match was amazing.
The Mexicans.
Yeah, the intro for the Lucha Brothers I know had you hooked.
Fantastic. Sure. I was in.
And then just the spots that they do, like I talked last episode about my style of wrestling, like what got me into it was that kind of mix of high flying and technical wrestling.
Yeah.
It initially hooked me in with guys like Ricochet and then guys like Daniel Bryan at the time, Bryan Danielson, how they kind of like mix that technical wrestling with the speed and the intensity of that more lucha style. And the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers,
fantastic.
They nailed that style. Like that is a perfect wrestling match to me. So many good spots, so high speed.
Yeah.
And
it didn't ever have a dip.
No. It was all up.
All up.
Yeah.
I remember thinking in that match, because the Gallo brothers come out. The Anderson and Gallows.
Yes.
I remember seeing them and thinking, and like I had written notes on that thing because we were like, oh, we're gonna review this thing yet already. They are just thriving, and recently I left a negative work environment, and like now I feel like I'm thriving. You know, we're doing the podcast, I'm doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and sending out auditions again. But you can just see the joy that those guys have doing what they're doing now.
Everybody looks like they're having fun.
Everybody looks like they're having fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are people who don't get along, 1,000,000%. Yeah. But it looks like they're actually doing what they want to do, and they're just having a good time at it. And that is when I was like, AEW.
Yeah. And they did an amazing job. Like, wrestlers are doing good when they take people that, like, I didn't know the Lucha Brothers at all. I had never watched them wrestle. I have no context for, like, their past or how good they are. And I went into that match being like, I want the Young Bucks to win because I at least know who they are and like I like how heelish they are. And by the end of that match, if the Lucha Brothers hadn't won, I would have rioted. Like I was so they had turned me completely where like I was so ready for them to win.
Yeah.
And I think the AEW wrestlers are really good at that, of like getting the crowd involved and like making you feel what they want you to feel. But that match absolutely blew our mind. And then we still had CM Punk and the main event to go.
Yeah, I think that for me was kind of like sometimes in WWE pay-per-views, they have this fantastic match and it's not the last match. And then the last match doesn't really
deliver.
No, it doesn't. And it kind of like, it's still a great match, but it's not of the like, holy shit version. So I think that's I was worried about that
Yeah.
in that case.
Before we get to that, though, what did you think of CM Punk? And Darby Allin?
No. Yeah, I don't know what it is about this little boy with makeup on, but I'm just like, 16-year-old Gina's heart is like, I'm a Darby Allin fan. And then the 33-year-old Gina is like, go for the older man. I really liked that match. It was my first time watching CM Punk wrestle live. And I remember thinking, damn, what, like, this is fantastic. And that kid is just as good.
Darby.
I say kid. I don't know how old he is. In my mind, he's like 20.
Yeah, everybody's a kid when you're over 30.
Yeah, that's true.
But Darby, just the way he sacrifices his body and he's so fast. And I really like CM Punk's matches so far. Like I've gone back and watched some CM Punk matches from like back in the day with WWE, and he was really good. His matches so far in AEW I think are good. They're not like blow my mind spectacular, but I think my favorite so far is the Darby Allin match. And I really like what Punk does where he wrestles really slowly. And I'm not sure if that's always been his style or if that's because he's older now and like he needs to. But he really focuses on like building the psychology of it and like building to a spot. And then when they need to go fast, he hits it fast.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the Darby Allin match where it felt like a lot of build. Darby Allin was kind of going everywhere. Punk seemed to be like taking it more slowly. And then at the end, he matched Darby's energy and like got the win.
Yeah.
And like it was so good. And like obviously that's such good booking. Like AEW does a really good job of making everyone seem good. There's unlike with WWE where so often it feels like, oh, you have the champion or like the more senior guy who they think is the star, and he's gonna just dominate. Whereas in AEW, Punk has fought now Darby Allin, Powerhouse Hobbs, and someone else. I forget who the third one is. But three, younger up-and-coming guys who he beat all of them, but they all looked great fighting him, which was just so cool to see.
I think Nick Khan, right? That's his name?
Tony Khan.
Tony Khan. I was so
close. Nick Khan, I think, is the guy from WWE.
Yeah, that's right. Nick Khan's the one that got rid of Adam.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Tony Khan. I think he does a really great job of, like you said, kind of making everybody seem, because going in, like literally going in blind. I had no idea who was who. I was just there for Bryan Danielson.
Right.
That's what I was there for, and I didn't even know he was going to show. I didn't know. At WWE, you can kind of tell who is the
who you
the crowd doesn't pop as much.
Yeah.
But it was kind of just a constant
everybody's over
flow, and I think they do a really good job of treating everyone equally in a sense.
Yeah, no, I think they do. Like even people who lose, I think it never feels like a bad loss. And I think that's something that WWE can learn from is like it's okay for people to lose. Like you can still
make them less of a person.
Right, you can still look strong in losses.
Yeah.
But yeah, so CM Punk, I think it's been really fun to watch him on the mic. I think he's so good with mic work, and I think his matches so far have been good. But then we get to the main event, and it was Kenny Omega versus Christian Cage, and I know you have a big crush on Christian Cage.
I do. He's one that which is weird because Edge doesn't stick out in my mind, but Christian
was your boy?
Yeah, he was one of them.
Yeah, okay.
He was one of them. I was also a little boy crazy.
He also, Christian has aged very well. That man is handsome.
What a handsome.
Very handsome.
We both sometimes just watch it, and at the same time we'll be like, he's just so damn handsome.
He's very good looking guy.
Yeah, so are you. It's okay.
I know. And so we get to that match, and this was the first time I think that I saw Kenny Omega wrestle, and I'd heard really good things, right? Like, just by being into wrestling for 2 years, following people on Twitter, I had heard Kenny Omega mentioned as the greatest wrestler in the world, and he's been on so many top 50, top 100, top 10 lists. But I'd never seen him wrestle, and it definitely didn't disappoint, especially against someone like Christian, who I wasn't expecting much from Christian, having not watched him wrestle yet in AEW either. I was expecting it to be kind of like when, famous older wrestlers return in WWE, and it's like, all right.
Yeah.
Great. But they put on a hell of a match.
They did.
And Kenny Omega won, obviously, and rightfully so. But really, really good match. And then we had the ending.
Yeah, I remember. So before we get into the ending, I did not think I was going to go in liking Kenny Omega. I was kind of like, ugh.
You don't like the. I think for all of the Elite, you came in hating their characters.
I was like, they suck and they're the worst. And oh my gosh, their character is just so exaggerated and tone it down. And I just like to hate on people, but I think they do a fantastic job.
Well, also, you, like we talked about last episode, you are kind of a kayfabe fan. And so a lot of times, you really like the heels that you like, but a lot of times, people you don't like, you will like be like, oh, I hate them, like, I hate everything about what they're doing. And I have to kind of remind you, like, it's their job to get you to hate them.
I
know.
Heels
want you to not like them.
Which they're doing fantastic at. Right. Because, like, I was just like, these people are the worst. But at the end of the match, I was not, it sucked that Christian lost. But I was not mad that he won. Yeah. That Kenny won. And it was when he tried to like jump on that railing.
Yes, he slid. That's right.
Slid off. And that improv, man, he like went right back on and he was like, I got it. The way he plays to the camera is fantastic.
And it was just so smart of him to acknowledge it. Like I feel like in WWE when you miss spots like that, they either try to set it up again or like there's an awkward like timing thing. Yeah. He just was like and like kept
and like made a joke about it.
Made a joke about it. It's just so smart.
It is.
And yeah, I love everything about all of the Elite, but specifically Kenny's like exaggerated personalities.
Yes.
And how again it just looks like everybody's having fun, but they're so goofy and they're so dumb. And I love heels that can be presented. You can just tell that
they're in a great spot.
Yeah. But I love heels that can be presented that way as like goofballs and like silly. Yeah. But also still be taken seriously.
You know who I think is a good example of the opposite of that? Is Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah, I can see that.
He's a heel.
And he's real over the top also.
But it doesn't play off the same way. Yeah. And watching him on Ms. and Mrs., like, I am not a Dolph stan. His character, he is a person, I'm sure is totally fine. But watching him on Ms. and Mrs., I was like, man, like, he could do so much, and I just don't know if they allow him to.
Like, I think John Morrison and Miz are a good example of that as well. Like, they
hey, ho, ho.
Miz, I think, has had his time, and, like, you know, he's not the greatest in-ring worker. I know, you love him. But
Sir,
John Morrison, what John Morrison does in the ring is unbelievable. Phenomenal. And I feel like if they treat it, they could have him be silly. Like, I love Johnny Drip Drip. I think it's funny. But the problem
I hated the dripsticks though.
The problem with WWE is so often they take these characters who are funny and they say, okay, you can't win because people won't take you seriously. And it's like Kenny Omega and the Elite, I think, are a good example of people who are having fun and being goofy, and that has no bearing on how good they are in the ring. Yeah. Which I really like.
I want to put a pin on going into what happened after Kenny won because we forgot to go over the Casino Royale, which was our first version of the Royal Rumble.
Yeah. So
that was like the big return for.
Yeah, when Ruby came back. Mm-hmm. So there was the Casino Royale Battle Royale. That was one of those. I remember saying it in the theater that I think I like the idea of the gimmick more than I like the way it plays out on TV.
I think it took a little long.
I think the problem...
The entrances took a little
The entrances took a long time, and unlike the Rumble, where it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then one person's music hit and you get a big pop, the problem with the doing it by card and like having women run out like every 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever is there's not enough time for people to react. Yeah. And so what I mentioned was like maybe if we knew who was in each suit prior to the match, then there would be some hype. Like if a Spade gets shown, you're like, oh, Spade is the one that has whoever, Thunder Rosa in it. Yeah. But when you don't know who it is, and like as a newer AEW fan, I don't know the music for a lot of these people. Yeah. And so the camera wasn't cutting to their entrances because it was happening so quickly, and the music was playing, but I couldn't tell whose music it was. And so I feel like the built-in hype that you get with the Royal Rumble didn't translate to the Casino Royale gimmick.
I think the Casino Royale is AEW's way of Royal Rumbling without getting sued.
No, I mean, I agree. I think clearly that's what it is. They want to have a similar Royal Rumble style gimmick without
and truthfully,
having that.
I think a WWE crowd in that situation would have been silent.
Yeah, I agree.
It was not my favorite match of the night.
Yeah.
It was right there. So it was also right there with it was Moxley versus the guy who returned.
So it was Moxley versus
I haven't what's his name?
I don't know New Japan at all. Well, Minoru Suzuki is the guy who came out afterwards. Yeah, but it was Moxley versus Kojima.
Oh, Kojima. That's right.
And that match, that's another. So I didn't vibe with that match super a lot either. I know you didn't either.
Yeah, I didn't.
But the thing that I really like about AEW is that there's been a lot of talk about this recently, but there's so many different styles of wrestling, and like so many different promotions around the world have different like styles to the type of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And the style that Jon Moxley and Kojima and then Jon Moxley and Suzuki showed is a style that's like very popular. Yeah. And I really like that AEW like can have like these, can have the Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks, which is this high flying, super energetic, whatever. And then also have Moxley versus Suzuki. That's just this very physical, very slow, like stiff fighting.
Yeah.
It wasn't my cup of tea.
It's more tactical, would you say?
I think it's just more power. It's more, you're supposed to be buying into the fact that they're hitting each other as hard as they can. Yeah. And I think they are in a lot of cases. So yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea for the first one I had seen. But I really appreciate that AEW gives these different options so that everybody gets something that they like.
I agree.
But yeah, the Casino Royale, I think I wasn't a huge fan of the match gimmick. I thought the wrestling in it was fine. What I really, really liked was the reception that Ruby got. And,
I did too.
And the song was amazing. Like Ruby Soho, like the fact she got that song is amazing.
Yes.
But the crowd reaction, I think, just goes to show how good AEW crowds are. Because, one, people knew that it was probably going to be her. They were chanting Ruby before she even came out. But also, like, Ruby Riott, like, I know people liked the Riott Squad in WWE, but, like, since we've been watching for 2 years, Ruby had done nothing in WWE, which is really sad. Like
she did the team up with Liv when they let go of
a half a minute.
What's her name?
Yeah, when they let go of Sarah, whatever.
Yeah.
The
Viking sister. Yeah. The Viking sister, the Viking's wife. Sorry.
Yes. So she had done nothing for 2 years, and she came into AEW and got treated like a star, which she is, and that's so cool.
Yeah, I remember thinking, all right, let's see what she's got. I will say, I was not a fan that she won that quickly.
Yeah, I thought
just because she wasn't really headlined at WWE. She's great. Like, she's...
Yeah.
Watching her wrestle, though, you could tell that she was a little rusty. Yeah, a little bit of ring rust.
I think she did better when she fought Britt a few weeks later.
Oh my gosh, that was great.
That match was really good. Britt's amazing.
Fantastic.
But yeah, in the Casino Royale, I thought Ruby was just okay. It felt like she was like timing was a little off, a little bit of rust.
It's also her
first time there, and I know as a newer fan coming in because of CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, what I think a lot of AEW fans were worried about was we don't want to just like start putting over all these new people just because they're new people.
Yeah.
That being said, the way they ended up handling it, I think, was good, and AEW is really good about that.
Yeah.
So now, do you want to get to the actual like ending of the main event?
Yep, I do.
The hype point.
I do.
So we get to the ending of Kenny Omega and Christian Cage. Great match. And Kenny Omega's doing his promo. He's about to send home the show. And we get the Adam Cole baby.
I know.
We get the not Shock the System, but whatever his new song is, which is a banger. And we never really watched NXT.
No.
So I apologize to any NXT fans. If you're super into NXT, this is not going to be the podcast for you because we just don't watch it.
And we only know the people that have like gone into WWE.
Right. Like
most recently, Karrion Kross is who I can tell you. And Mandy Rose now has the title over Raquel Gonzalez, who is from the 956. I have to.
Anyway. So I've kept up with NXT. I really liked NXT before the rebrand in terms of just wrestling. So I would watch like the pay-per-views, and we've been to an NXT takeover, which was really good. But we just didn't watch it week to week, and it was mostly just that's another hour or 2 hours of wrestling that just we can't commit to.
Which sucks because it's Triple H's show, and
it was really good. I think I had pitched to her many times that we should stop watching Raw and start watching NXT.
Couldn't do it.
But we just, the star power and like we were invested in WWE and we couldn't get invested in NXT. So I apologize to any NXT fans. But I know of Adam Cole. I've watched a lot of his matches and pay-per-views.
And I knew he was married to Britt.
And we knew he was married to Britt, and we knew he was coming. Like, that was a big rumor as well. So when his music hit, the theater got very excited because, again, we were watching this in a theater with like people that we didn't know. So they got really excited. And I think you maybe were a little disappointed.
Kind of. I was until he turned. Because he came out like, nobody's going to stop me. Yeah. And then he came and they were like, baby.
Yeah, because Kenny Omega did the like, anybody who could stop me is either doesn't work here or is dead, and then Adam Cole came out. Yeah.
And then, oh my gosh, but the like reuniting of the friendship when he turned heel, I loved.
They're so like, cute.
Dang it!
I love everything about the Young Bucks and Adam Cole's relationship. I do too. It's so good.
I actually recorded. So I did. Yeah. I recorded, which we can maybe put in here at some point. But I recorded our reaction of Adam Cole coming out because I was like, this is the Daniel Bryan one. This is going to be Daniel Bryan. I'm going to record it. I'm going to record our reactions. And it wasn't. And I was like, oh, yay.
But then
I re-recorded because I was like, this can't be it. Like, this isn't. They have to bring out a good guy because they have, like, the heels. And sure enough, that remix of his March. Without the yes chant. But even in the theater, people were like, yes.
That remix was so good. It is so good. His intro is such a good intro. And then, I appreciate that Bryan doesn't want to do the yes chants. I think that's really upstanding of him.
Yeah.
I love that the crowd still does it every time. And the crowd's yes chants on the pay-per-view, the theater's yes chants in person, like everybody was hyped. And
so good.
And that was definitely the moment that solidified, I think, for both of us. Like I was pretty much on board also already, but like Bryan coming out and looking how he looked and like
just radiating how excited he was.
Excitement and like he's in the best physical shape he's been and just like he's clearly so into it. And so to talk a little bit about Bryan Danielson. We've liked him since we started watching WWE. We've liked him because of, Total Bellas and Total Divas. We liked him in all of the matches that he's had.
Yeah, he was my flying squirrel in my first two shows.
Right. When he was with Eric Rowan. Yeah.
When he was with Rowan, yeah. He'd just throw himself and I was like, the flying squirrel!
Yeah.
Because I had no idea who he was.
And watching him now, he's clearly having the best time he's had in years.
I agree.
And he is clearly still one of the best wrestlers in the world, and he is very quickly showing it. And I love
that match with him and Kenny.
How brutal he is. His freaking chest is just like so red every time he fights.
All the time.
It's been so much fun to watch how different he is portrayed in AEW versus WWE so far. And it'll be really interesting. So I've been keeping up with AEW since the pay-per-view, like weekly. Like I've been watching all the Dynamites, all the Rampages. Gina's life's been a little busier than mine. So she's been mostly keeping up via recaps and like by me telling you what happens. And I'll have you come in and like watch like Bryan's match to like see how crazy it is. But to say what's going forward, essentially what they've set up is it's going to be Hangman Adam Page versus Kenny Omega at the pay-per-view next week.
Okay.
And this is a payoff of a long-term storytelling in AEW that I don't know a ton about, but essentially they used to be tag team partners. They've known each other since back in like New Japan.
Yeah.
Kenny turned on him at one point.
Yeah, I know the background to this.
Yeah, it's been building for like 2 years. So everybody thinks Hangman's going to win. And then they're also doing a tournament to see who the next challenger is going to be for the AEW title. And by all likelihood, it will be Bryan versus Moxley in the finals of that. So we're going to get to watch that match, which is going to be great. Very excited for that. But assuming Bryan wins, which I think he will, I don't think they have him beat Hangman for the title. I don't think they give Bryan the title that quickly. I don't think they have Hangman lose that quickly.
I don't know.
So
I would say it's because AEW writing is so different from WWE. Yeah. Like in WWE, I can watch something and be like, "Oh, right,
this is gonna happen.
This is about to happen," and he'll be like, "There's no way," because there's been a lot of times where I spoil it and he hates it, because it's just
predictable.
It kind of.
Yeah.
It's just kind of predictable, especially like when you study script writing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of see the pattern and how it's going to play out. And so there's a lot of times when I'm like, oh yeah, well, this guy's going to turn. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, no. And I was like, trust me. And in AEW, I can't do that. I am honestly always surprised with how it turns out. Because I'll be like, oh, this is going to, like, oh, watch, this might happen. And he'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then it just doesn't, and something else completely different happens. And I think that's why I've been kind of like more into AEW, because it's more surprising to me that I can't figure it out.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. Like, you know, the more we watch it, maybe it'll get a little more predictable for us in AEW as well. Like, this is the new shiny thing, right? Like, it's AEW is, you know, really taking off right now. CM Punk and Bryan Danielson
new
coming
shiny
back.
thing for us.
For us, yeah. But I mean, even just in the wrestling world, they've only been around for like a few years. So, we'll see if we continue to like it as much as we do. But honestly, so far, I see the hype. Like the hype that I mentioned earlier, where like people that I knew who were super into wrestling would say like AEW is so much better, and I didn't get it. I get it now.
I can say
it's so much fun to watch, and it honestly has kind of like reinvigorated my enjoyment of wrestling, which had been kind of like waning with WWE. But that's something that we're excited about. So moving forward, this will be a weekly recurring podcast, like we mentioned. And what we're essentially going to do is just talk about all the shows from that week. We'll be posting on Saturday. So we'll talk about Raw and SmackDown for WWE and Dynamite and Rampage for AEW. We'll give our opinions. We probably won't do like full recaps because it's a lot of wrestling, but we'll give highlights, like things we really enjoyed, things we didn't enjoy, any news, things like that. But one of the things we're excited about with this podcast is really just giving us an excuse to like get more into it, because it has been kind of declining our love of it recently. So it's really excited us to get back into it and like have a platform to be able to talk about it. And so moving forward, we'll talk about both AEW and WWE on the same show. There won't be split shows like there were for these first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And like Gina mentioned earlier, we will be doing special episodes for pay-per-views. So anytime there is a pay-per-view for either AEW or WWE, we will do an episode specifically about the pay-per-view.
Which we will probably recap more than
exactly. And we might even do some fun stuff, like maybe not on YouTube or on podcast feeds, but maybe on our Instagram and Twitter. We might do like quick 5-minute videos where we do like predictions, like who do we think is going to win, things like that. So make sure to follow us. It is at ThatWas3Pod on Twitter. And what is the Instagram?
That Was 3 Podcast.
That Was 3 Podcast with the number 3 on Instagram. So it was That Was 3 spelled out on Twitter. That Was 3 with a number on Instagram.
Once we learn how to edit, we will place them somewhere in this area.
Absolutely. This is a learning experience for us, so I'm sure we will have like some sort of graphic on screen letting you know all this information as well. And moving forward, it will be on YouTube for sure, and we are working on getting it on podcast services, so we are hoping it will be on both Apple and like iTunes and Spotify for sure. So look forward to that, and we will see you next week.
Bye!